We've only seen just the tip of the iceberg of traumatic stress in journalism.
When I covered the Boston Marathon bombing, I realized I am not okay.
A mom killed herself and her 3 children. It was really hard.
My first story was a triple homicide.
The building had collapsed. It was chaos.
Katrina was my first big event.
Sandy Hook.
It went up in flames, and after that, it was just a free-for-all. It truly looked like it. It looked like a bombed-out war zone. Local news is not what it once was.
You just hear pow, 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 pow. Now all of a sudden, we're in the middle of a mass shooting. I look down and I just see the people who have been hit.
2 years between George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and the pandemic in and of itself.
Witnessing the execution of hundreds of people, which is what I did helplessly, I think it just does a number on your head. Lifting that camera is like lifting a 57 Pontiac because you've seen so much stuff.
We're putting our people in some pretty hazardous places now.
We're sending people to these jacked up scenarios.
If you're feeling unsafe, that affects you mentally.
I think it was a culmination of things. In my first market, I had to cover the murder of my friend and colleague.
It's the repetitive injury. You get injured over and over and over again.
News is 24/7.
We've got a number of walking wounded in the newsroom.
You keep shoving everything in.
I would wake up sometimes dreading going to work.
His anxiety grew tremendously.
I just didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about it.
I was finding myself becoming numb to everything.
It's isolation. So when people get numb, they stop wanting to communicate with others.
I just, I had to process that by myself. There was never any kind of talk about it at the station or anything like that.
It was never discussed.
No.
We didn't have any training before.
No, there was never any training.
No, not at all. Zero training in that regard.
There are times when it felt quite lonely, I've got to say. It felt quite lonely.
He was embarrassed by it. And at that time, it wasn't something that was talked about. You were seen as weak and you put on a good front and you move on.
I was really kind of ashamed of my reaction. I just started sobbing uncontrollably.
The stereotype and the persona of a journalist is that, we're immune to the chaos that we see. We're not. We're not immune to it.
I felt the weight of these stories on me when I would go home.
Really, it changed the game for me of physical and mental and emotional exhaustion in news.
I would curl up into a ball some days and just cry. I didn't know how to control it.
I felt like regularly it was only a matter of time until the worst happened to me.
You can go into a really dark place after something like that.
And I was like, Neil, please don't do anything to hurt yourself. And then I was told by the state police, and my worst fear became reality.
Do you think we could actually talk about what's going on here?
This is not talked about enough. What the reporter's going through when they walk away from the scene and when they get home.
I think there's the shame.
Your success level is based on how well you present, right? So you're always going to present well, regardless of how you feel, regardless of what's in your mind, your heart, whatever. You're good at putting on an appearance.
He was so traumatized. He ended up quitting. He ended up resigning.
Every time I turn around, I'm seeing, people that have been in the business, 15 plus years like myself get out.
Reporters, photographers, truck operators. You are sometimes the first responders.
You show up because you feel like you have a duty. You signed up for this. You're there in the moments like the first responders are.
Journalists are often not just first responders, but also last responders. You don't just leave the scene with the patient. You're still there. You're still there for the 4 o'clock, for the 5 o'clock, for the 6 o'clock, for the 11 o'clock. Oh, and by the way, you're there for the funeral.
We're all kind of in these different bubbles. The military's in this bubble, and paramedics are in this bubble, firefighters and journalists. And there's nothing that connects us except for trauma. We all know what that's like. But I do think that they've gotten to the finish line a lot quicker in terms of trying to figure out some way to deal with that.
This topic is very important. It really is.
It's a cultural thing that we have to do in our newsrooms to say it's not weakness for you to talk about your mental health.
You're losing a lot of dedicated veteran journalists. So I think we have a problem and we're ignoring the problem.
You can't send people out day after day and expect everything's going to be all right, because it's not.
You can be out on a story for 4 or 5 hours and just see all kinds of horrific things, and then your minute and a half story is antiseptic. You cut out all that stuff, but you can't cut it out of your brain. It stays with you.